This is going to be kind of a very intimate session. Yesterday we had a session and we had about 60 people or so, but I think with the switch on the calendar and whatnot, and of course the promotion this morning for the 1 o'clock, the big ideas thing, I think it made a difference. But I do want to mention that we are recording this session and it will be posted, so those who aren't here can access it, okay? So we're going to get started with Chad Irrational, who is the Vice President of Long-Term Care and Linked Benefit Sales at Ash Brokerage. We consider Chad the LTC maestro there. He not only helps educate advisors and their clients on the importance of care planning, but he also orchestrates a smooth application process from start to finish. So, Chad?
Thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, everyone. I always say I have to have full disclosure and a little bit of background about myself. I'm from Indiana, so I'm an avid Notre Dame fan, an avid IU fan, and I'm a recovering Edward Jones advisor. So Carol asked me to talk about some of the things that Ash Brokerage is doing technology-wise, just to help advisors, help have the conversation, help to identify opportunities. And I'm going to run through two of them. One a little bit more detailed called our long-term care conversation guide or conversation or discussion tool. And the next one is through a venture within Ash Brokerage. We created a company called Journey Guide Planning. And we're going to walk through a little bit of the Journey Guide software, not what it looks like, but more about the advantages that it gives you. So the first thing we've created on the website is what's called the long-term care discussion tool. And this was really built out of the idea of advisors changing from long-term care as a place and more as long-term care as an event. So going back to roots and how do we have and engage clients in a conversation. So as you see, the first page that always pops up here is very simple. One of the major aspects of what we do is to help our clients plan for living a long life. And I want to discuss with you today those serious, if not irreversible consequences, what living a long life can have on you and your family. If anybody has been through the CLTC designation, these words are very familiar. But I found over my 12 years at Ash, this really, really resonates with clients. And so we start with a few questions. This is a dynamic, this is a client interactive tool to make it easier. So we'll go through just a couple slides here. Just simple, to what extent do you believe that the longer you live, the greater your health could become compromised, you may need some sort of extended care. So this gives a chance for clients to actually answer the questions. It's about their plan. And they're weighted, as you'll see. So in this case, the client said agree. Next is the impact that they have on their family, emotionally, physically, and financially. So they just get to answer the questions. That's what's nice, is it's so interactive. It's a co-planning type scenario and just going through it. The next one is, what's your plan? Do you have a plan? And what we found is actually all clients have a plan. And it's a matter of, is it their intentional plan or their unintentional plan? So this helps us get through that process. Do you have a plan? No. Do you know how you fund the plan? I'm not really sure. And that's a big question we found for clients too. And is your family aware of the plan? That's even a bigger one, because usually it's the guys or the males that are saying, oh, I know what's going to happen. And then the wife and the kids never know. And then when the macho guy who's never going to need care needs care, it's panic mode. So would you like your family to provide the care or manage the care being given? I'm yet to find anyone that we've done this with that says, I want my family to provide the care. Nobody wants to. But as children, we will. And I think our children probably would. I have 4 children. I have no intention of them providing the care. I can't get them to fold their clothes, let alone take care of me. And then where would you like to receive the care? And this is where I talked about early on that the tendency is people think of long-term care as a place, not as an event. Now this gives it a chance to say, if you do need it, which we've kind of gone through a point of not saying they will, but they could, but if they did need it, where would you like to receive care? And it's home or assisted living. Nobody ever says nursing home. Not once has it come up. And then have you considered the impact on your retirement plan should an event occur? And we've got a little tool that I'll walk through that's basic before we get into Journey Guide. No, this now provides them with what we call a long-term care readiness score. So you see, based off of these answers, the client's a 37. So I call that in the red zone. we probably need to have a conversation, or the advisor needs to have a conversation about creating a plan. And one thing we believe at ASH is a plan doesn't mean buying insurance. A plan just means that, having a plan. If somebody wants to buy insurance, great, that's wonderful for us. But if they don't, as long as they have a plan at the end. So we can look at it, do we want to have the impact of a long-term care in your retirement? They can say yes or no. I'll get into what happens if they say yes. But then at the end of that, we have one more question. If you were to receive care, would you prefer to self-fund, fully insure, or cost share? And again, self-funding is fine as long as there's a plan. And what we do then is we gather a little bit of information, and the reason we gather the information is we save this, so you want to be able to go back to your clients and be able to see it, is we have the opportunity to either finish the conversation right there or print a summary. So here's just an idea of this case of what the output looks like. This is just something that you can put in your drawer, in the file, print it to a PDF, put it in the electronic file, throw it up in the cloud, however it may be, but then you have it. And this conversation with ASH is always held within the ASH portal. You can always go back and revisit it, but if you want to change any answers, you're going to start a new conversation. And that's for a compliance reason, because you don't want to say it one time and now go back and change it to make it seem like you got the answers, or if you change the answers, you don't want to draw it into question. So, talking about the impact on our retirement plan. This goes back, they want to see the impact. And this is a very basic tool, and we understand that, but it was just to help. So we gathered here a little bit of information on John Smith, got his email, he's got $500,000 of current assets. We're going to assume an annual rate of return of 5%. We're going to assume he's going to retire at 65, an annual withdrawal rate of 4%. I know the 4% rule doesn't always come into play right now, but these are not static numbers. These are numbers that can be changed. Monthly cost of care today is $6,000, and what we built in right here is the cost of care guide. You can click on that link, and we've linked it just to Genworth's cost of care, that it pops up a new window, so now you can go through that discussion of what does it look like in their area. We're going to assume a care event starts at age 80 and ends at 85. So here's the great thing. First of all, you get to show all the wonderful things that happen because they're never going to have an event. And the great news is if they never have an event, here you are out at age 95, and John's got north of $1 million. Great. You know, so nothing happens, everything works out well. Well, let's show the other side. What if he does have a long-term care event? We know the cost of care is inflating. We know what's going to happen. And what happens synonymously, and I get asked a lot about this part right here. We can talk about John's married. So when John goes on claim, does the income stop that's needed for his wife to live? Absolutely not. So this is just a scenario. At age 80, when he goes on claim, the event's going to be almost $12,500 a month for 5 years, and it's going to inflate. So we know that that total cost to be $800,000. But if you look at what did it really cost, it was north of $800,000 because when John passes away, all the assets are gone because we had to still spend down income. So just a simple tool to go through. It goes back to that same question. I still, after seeing this, want to fully insure. That's okay. Go to print the summary. Everything looks the same that's sitting here. And we do have the ability to print a kind of a CYA, but a disclosure form that says, I have looked at it, I've decided that I want to self-insure. You as advisors put that in your file, you have it. I don't think that's a scare tactic. I think it's just, it's okay, but I need to show as your advisor that we talked about it. So basic, yes, but what we found advisors that have adopted and started using this is that clients really like it, and it's interactive. So we get a lot of questions about, do you have a client fact finder? Well, if we want to find facts, let's just ask questions. So the next one is what we call holistic advice in selling in 2020. And what we found is going back in the past, and this is going to go into our journey guide tool, which is a very, very interesting tool. I will tell you, I'm not the one that you want to talk to about it. We have a great set of individuals that run this business day in and day out. So what's the past look like? You know, in the 1980s, the focus was on products. Whether it was our market, whether it was annuities, whether it was life insurance, everything was products, products, products. The buzzwords that started to come out in the 90s was everything was focused around the broker-dealers. How do we create accounts with broker-dealers? How do we create relationships with broker-dealers? In the 2000s, we started to move into advisors and clients. The industry focus, let's talk about the advisor, let's talk about the clients. And in the 2020s, everything's around holistic advice. We hear holistic planning all the time. But what does that mean? So let's talk about the opportunity. As we get the opportunity with holistic planning, there's 12.6 trillion expected to be in IRA assets in 2022. I mean, think about that for a little bit. $12.5 trillion. As we talk about our world in the long-term care arena, that's probably where a lot of assets are going to come from. 6.6 trillion just in 401ks alone, and $325 billion in annuity sales in 2022. For those of you in the room, for those of you that will be watching this, that's a huge opportunity. But we've got to find a way to do it differently, because we have to be talking about continuous value. It's a value proposition. Everything's about value. How do we bring value? How is the best interest solution? As we talk about best interest regulation coming back again. Interactive. Clients want data like this. They don't want to have a conversation for an hour and we're talking about an income plan and say, well, why don't you come back in 6 weeks? We'll go through it all again as a reminder, and then maybe I'll stick something in there. Personalized recommendations. How can you adjust what their situation looks like on the fly? And same day decisions. We can take a plan, we can make adjustments to the plan. Is this what you want to do? Yes, I want to go with that. So let's talk about it. And this is specific to annuities. If anybody here has ever done annuities, you've probably seen something like this. You would talk to your clients about an annuity in retirement, so you pull out what is the ledger in the annuity. Maybe you pull out 6 or 7 different ledgers and show it. It becomes transactional. It's not those things that clients want. It's not consumer friendly. It's not interactive. I look at that, and I've dealt with annuities, and I'm already overwhelmed. That's not going to help me make a decision. Although it's great data, that's all it is. So let's look at our client that we're going to do, and I'll wrap up here. A single male, 60, he's going to retire this year. Last year he made $80,000. Plans to take Social Security, which is about $25,000 before tax. He's got $1 million in his IRA. He's got a 40-60 allocation, fairly common. He's got fees of 150 basis points, which includes any AUM plus any product that could be fees for commissions. And his spending goal is to do $50,000 after taxes. And he wants to be sure that he has at least $1 left at age 95. Well, under his current situation, with everything he has at that $1 million sitting there, he has a goal that he can sustain with a high likelihood within our software. We run 5,000 Monte Carlo simulations like that. So 5,000 is unprecedented in the industry. That he can spend $44,500 after tax and still have $1 left at 95. But what did he want? He wanted 50. So we can show within Journey Guide that if we take $200,000 out of his current portfolio, and it could be qualified dollars or not, move it into an annuity that starts providing income at age 70, we've now put him in a scenario if he can get almost $50,000 after tax right now. So I think as you're sitting with clients, and it happens that fast, because we make updates to software and I go in and play with it because my thought is if I'm going to talk about it, it better happen that fast. It happens that fast. We can do things if we can adjust. What if you delay Social Security 3 years? How does that change your likelihood? And we've got an output that'll say you had an 86%. Now you build in a long-term care event. Well, you build in a long-term care event, you had an 86% chance. Now you have a 12% chance of having a healthy retirement. How much easier would that make it for you as advisors to talk about it? Because typical financial planning software is what? They're accumulation tools. This is a decumulation tool. So it's not a direct competitor with Money Guide Pro or eMoney. This is just a way to say, hey, let's look at this. And the ability to, does it help you sell long-term care? Does it help you sell annuities? So it takes into the emotional buy. This is just a report of showing where the dollars come from. You can see how the annuity pushes it out a little bit, starts to come in at age 70. And we talk about this, what we call the fiduciary zone or client best interest. So the top line is the scenario with moving $200,000. The bottom line is leaving it as it is. If you have to take this into a fiduciary standard, which one looks better? You know, there's some fiduciary standard in this, but it helps you to play in that arena and to say, look, this is why we did it. We could have left it there, you know, it kind of to a point of is what it is. But this is what we're doing at Ash Brokerage to help in having a conversation, whether it's on retirement planning or technology. That's specifically what Carol asked me to talk about.
Yes.
We think that technology is going to be the future. It's got to be easy, but this is a co-planning software. You sit down with your client, you put the information in before they come in, you can go through these scenarios inside of 10 or 12 minutes and make decisions like that. So we're making it easier. We talked about we're going to have a scenario where they can push a red button that says buy now, and they can get the annuity. So the annuity will be first. It's very hard in the long-term care arena to say buy now because we haven't done the other things that we need to do. So if there are no questions, I don't know how much time I'm on. This is the first time I've done this without a clock. So.
Questions at the end, if it's okay with the small.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Very impressive. And tools are truly important for us because we know our subject matter so well and the client doesn't. So when we have an effective tool, such as the two that you shared with us, and I know that Ash has many more, I think that it doesn't become a sale. It becomes working with them as an advisor. Instead of being a product pusher, tools like Ash Brokerage offers us, allows us to approach the client in a mindset that works for them. I now would like to introduce Denise Scott. Denise is the CEO of Axia Partners, and she's been in the business for 20 years. She started when she was 2, and it's been a straight road up, to tell you the truth. She did actually start as an agent and now leads the company, Axia Partners. Denise?
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Chad. I think tools are becoming more and more useful for advisors and for all of us who are looking for new ways to deliver the message and provide education to people about retirement planning, long-term care planning, you name it. So I think they kind of all go hand in hand. But Carol asked me today to talk a little bit about working with a specialist and kind of how you know, we've done this for a number of years, getting engagement with your clients about the long-term care discussion. And Chad made a really good point. You know, a lot of people don't think about long-term care being facilities, and maybe long-term care is not the right word. We need to talk to them about care events or care planning, because so many of us have seen that. We've had an experience with it, and for those of you in the room who work with clients directly, it's pretty good bet that most of you have seen that as well. So starting off, and I was planning on having a seat, so I have notes. But I want to share a little bit with you about working with a specialist and kind of how, you know, why will that help you in your business? And if you've been in the business for a while, and being a member of NAIFA for a number of years myself, that's where I started. I started going to NAIFA meetings and partnering with financial advisors to help them sell long-term care insurance and really solve that problem for their clients. I started that years and years ago, and quite honestly, you know, Carol said I started when I was about 20, 25, 26, and I didn't have the credibility because no one thought I knew enough about it. I wasn't old enough to know enough about long-term care to be able to do that. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic early on, but you keep going, you go to the meetings, you keep showing up, and they see you every week, and you know, I was talking the same story. So it really wound up working out very well. But anyway, working with a specialist, that was the story I started with, and I've been telling that story for a number of years. Why? Well, first of all, expertise. For those of you who are watching this, you've been in the business for a while, you do financial planning, or you sell life insurance. Lots of people have sold long-term care insurance or tried to sell it, tried to present it to their clients, and it's a complicated topic. So the bottom line is expertise is where you know, expertise is what you get working with a specialist, working with someone like Chad at Ash Brokerage or Tom at LTC Partners or one of us. It really is something that can add value to your business. You know, when you have agency experience like that in many, many years, knowing product, knowing process and things like that can really help you and bring that value. I'm sure most of you will agree that if you need a cardiologist, you're not going to go to your general practitioner, right? You're going to go to that specialist to get the best possible care. The same is true in this business. You really want to find that specialist that you can work with and engage them so that they can help you bring the most value to your clients. So getting back to, let's see, so approaching your clients. Lots of you have an existing book of business, existing group of clients that you can be talking to, and a lot of them have not done anything about long-term care. They don't have a plan, as Chad said earlier. That's the most important thing. Insurance isn't right for everyone, but having a plan absolutely is right for everyone. And so helping them through that process, and your approach to them can really be engaging them in some conversation, asking them some questions, maybe using the tool that Chad presented earlier. Those are ways to kind of get people moving on the subject, because it is something that people like to put off. It's not the favorite dinner conversation, although I will tell you, I have friends, we sit around the table and we talk about long-term care now. Who's going to take care of you? Who's going to take care of you? And I'm finding that slowly my friends are engaging in that, and they have actually, most of them have purchased long-term care insurance for themselves now, because it's a serious topic, and all of us are concerned about making sure that we have enough money to live comfortably through retirement. So working with engaging your existing clients, making sure that they are protected with a long-term care plan is one way that you can kind of create a little more stickiness with your clients. For some of you, if you haven't engaged your clients in the long-term care discussion or the care planning discussion, they're going to go somewhere else because they are thinking about it. It is becoming an issue for them because they've got personal experience. So you should be the one to engage them in that conversation and help them through the process, ask them questions, and get them talking about it. So this is, working with a specialist can kind of help you get through the process without having to ask a lot of the hard questions yourself. I think the biggest thing I've run into in working with financial advisors and other insurance agents in the past has been they don't want to ask the tough questions about health and asking their clients what medications they take, and do you have cancer, stroke, diabetes, and all of the things that go along with that line of questioning. Sometimes it's tough. And if you engage and work with a specialist, you can kind of get that off your plate and let that specialist help you with the tough questions. And if by chance that person applies for coverage and is declined, guess what? The specialist can kind of take a little bit of that heat for you and not make you have to deliver that unfortunate news. Because let's face it, we all know that long-term care insurance isn't for everybody. Not everyone can health qualify, right? So approaching your existing clients, it's a great way to really engage them and come to the table with a new discussion topic. And if you are a financial advisor, if you're investing assets and things like that, it's protection for your business too. If your clients start spending money on long-term care, they're not going to invest more money with you. They're not going to bring more money to you to help them plan. They're going to be spending that money on their care. So another reason, yes, to go back to your existing clients. Bottom line is getting the appointment. I think that's the most important thing. If you do decide to work with a specialist, and any one of the three of us here, I'm sure some of you even actually have friends or have other folks that you're acquainted with that are in the long-term care business as specialists. But just get the appointment, because we can help you with the rest. You don't have to engage and answer all of their questions while you're on the phone. The bottom line is you can say, gosh, Tom, I have a specialist that I work with, and I think it'd be really a valuable use of your time to spend 20 or 30 minutes talking, the three of us talking about how you plan to cover your long-term care expense should you need it in the future. Would you agree that that might be a valuable conversation for you? So it's a pretty easy conversation to have with a client. It's hard for them to say no to information and education. You're not just going to sit down and run quotes for them right away. You've got to gather some information. So it's a great way to get them to the table without you having to answer all the questions that might pop up. And there's dozens of them, as these guys will tell you. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about a case study or two. And Carol asked me specifically to talk to you about how can this increase your business? How can you increase your sales with this? Now, this is an example of a big one. So if you came across a situation like this, you're going to want to call Tom or you're going to want to call me and get some help, because to get a group of 9,000 engaged and educated and all that sort of thing, you can't do it by yourself. And quite frankly, none of the insurance companies out there are going to let you do it by yourself. They're going to want you to have somebody who really knows what they're doing at the table with you. So this was an example of this is a broker that I met, gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago at a conference. And so we started talking with him about, what are you selling, what kind of products are you selling to your clients? He does large case mostly, ancillary products type business. But so he had a university, not a huge one, 9,000 lives. We were able to get a simplified underwriting offer from Transamerica. And we placed $358,000 in premium on that case. The broker commission was $58,175, so we have a split arrangement that we make with brokers that we work with. And the reason is because he really didn't do anything other than making the introduction, and I say that respectfully because he didn't want to, nor did he know how. So he made the introduction, was on a few calls, was engaged when we had the implementation process and the conversations around how this is going to go. And so we did educational seminars on site at the university in lots of different departments. We did over 30 educational webinars where people could come to an online education session that lasted about 30 minutes. We talked to over 400 people individually, and most of those consultations happened virtually, so we weren't actually sitting there meeting people face to face. It was almost all virtual. And again, $58,000 in commission first year for the broker, and then his renewal commissions over 10 years, $71,600. There's also ongoing re-enrollments happening at that university every year. So new hires, people who want to apply on just outside the enrollment period, they go through full underwriting. So this is just one example, and again, this gentleman didn't have to do a whole lot. And so you can imagine he's out looking for more opportunities like that. So one other quick example of another case, and I didn't put it up here on the slide, but I want to share this one with you because we just wrapped this one up about a week ago. So this came from an individual agent that actually works in our organization. She was working with a NAIFA member, and he had primarily a P&C agency, but does life insurance and so on. And so he said, gosh, I have this friend who runs a business, small family-owned business. It's actually a catering company. And so this catering company had 500 employees, and the nature of the industry really wouldn't lend itself to make you think that, gosh, this should be a long-term care case. So what we did was we went back to the employer and said, listen, you have a small closely held family business. In fact, 11 of the executives had the same last name. So kind of a tightly knit group there. And so the proposed executive carve-out program that we put together for them was the 11 managers, and the outcome of the case so we educated everyone. So we were able to go to the insurance company and say, we have an executive carve-out plan we've put together. And so we were able to get simplified underwriting for the entire group. So even though we were only getting an executive carve-out for 11 people and their spouses, we actually had the ability to offer simplified to the remainder of the group, and we had about 7 or 8 additional people. And we knew that was not going to be a big popular benefit in a catering company. So anyway, the outcome was the plan design was $170 a day, $186,000 $500 pool of money per person, a 90-day elimination period. We did use deferred inflation, so the employer is going to decide if they're going to buy up additional coverage later on for those employees. And we placed about $60,000 in premium on that group. So that was a small case. It was not something that was long and drawn out and complicated like this one. But it also really gave us the ability to help that employer and create an executive carve-out for that small, closely held business. And those are out there everywhere. A lot of you have business owner clients, and so that's another example of what you might be able to do. And again, if you've not done this before, engage a specialist. Call one of us to really kind of help you through the process and understand how long-term care fits into a business or an individual plan going forward. Educate the decision makers. Now, this really pertains to the LTC Marketplace at this point. And talking a little bit about what's out there now. There really is only one true group long-term care carrier out there today, and that's Genworth. So they're the only one left that offers that group coverage with master contract with individual certificates. There's the new plans that are out there, the ones that Tom and I use all the time are multi-life long-term care plans. It means that you have individual contracts that are issued by the insurance company, they're fully portable, and the employer really just kind of sponsors the plan, if you will. They don't hold the master contract, everybody's got their own insurance contract if they participate. And we've seen changes in pricing on those plans. For any of you who have sold long-term care insurance, you know the prices have gone up over the last 20 years dramatically. Not just on new products, obviously on the old ones as well. As I mentioned, group LTC markets are very limited, but the multi-life products are expanding out there. So we have products from Transamerica, Mutual of Omaha, and LifeSecure in the traditional space. And then of course there are lots of plans out there for the hybrid type long-term care plans. We're really seeing so much more expansion into that area. Companies like Trustmark and Allstate, Transamerica, offering those multi-life long-term care plans in the workplace that are hybrid. And then of course you've got your individual business across the board on both sides. So we have limitations on what's available to us, but the problem's not going away. And so ignoring it is not going to solve the problem. So it's really important to have the conversation, help people understand what the marketplace dynamics have been, and then move forward from that. It does, we have lots of options, just not 100 like we had 20 years ago. Employers are looking for ways to solve their employee retention, their benefit problem. There's a lot of conversation out there around lost productivity these days. And so we're having these conversations with employers today, big and small. What are the employers' concerns? These are what we hear most often today. What are employee concerns? They're caregivers, and there's an article out there that was put out by the Harvard Business School called The Caring Company. And if you have a chance to put your fingers on it, read it. It's pretty amazing, the information that comes out of that and all the discussion around how employees don't want to admit that they're caregivers, and it's costing them money, it's costing the employer money, there's all kinds of issues around it, and we're looking for ways to kind of help people through that process. It's not always insurance, buying insurance is the decision or is the outcome, but getting information along that path is important for employees, and employers are looking for ways to do that. So we're trying to expand that. We're putting together what we call a continuum of care to help people realize, what are the lost productivity issues in their business? What does even one lost opportunity cost an employer? And think about the people who employ hundreds of thousands of employees across the country. What do you think their lost productivity numbers might be? They're staggering numbers. They're almost not believable if you look at them in the big picture. So we have a lot of these conversations with employers talking about replacement costs of employees that wind up becoming full-time caregivers and quitting their jobs. So these are things that we're hearing and seeing in the marketplace today. We're talking to employers and having these conversations, but really educating the decision maker with this type of information. One of the things that we do if we have an employer who is interested in offering a long-term care benefit to their employees, we start out with an education discussion. We talk to them about how important it is to really get the message out there that long-term care planning is important, not just insurance planning. So providing an education is really our key. So we have an initial call with you to uncover the need with your client and uncover the need of your client. Really kind of gather information, kind of make sure that we're approaching this the right way. And then this is kind of the continuum of how this process works. We need to get a census. We will have you we'll attend a call with you and have the client present to present the proposal. We'll look at different carrier options. There's lots of options out there, as I said, not hundreds like we used to have, but we'll put together the paperwork and the proposal so that we're looking at the right companies, the companies that will offer coverage to that employer and their employees. We'll introduce our enrollment team. We have a comprehensive marketing plan, and I know that Tom and Chad also do the same. So again, this goes back to working with a specialist and someone that can help you with all the steps along the way. I mentioned earlier that education is probably our biggest thing. Education is key, really helping people understand what long-term care is, what care planning really means, not just to them as an individual, but to their family, and really to kind of bring it all together and help them understand that it's not about insurance necessarily, it's about having a plan. So we kind of speak the same language. And then, of course, enrollment begins if of course, that group is approved and they choose to move forward. So, again, working with a specialist, educating the decision maker, helping them come to a decision on whether they want to offer the education and the benefit to their employees. And that's, again, kind of the step-by-step, the consultation, the kickoff, the marketing plan, and then, of course, implementation. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I would remind you that there is a reason that the name of our center has the word care planning, limited and extended care planning. Because I think most of us who have been in the industry for some period of time realize that no matter what the plan is, at least it's a plan. But so many people have no plan, that when either you use one of the tools that Chad uses or the approach that an employer may use a specialist to help them see the need for planning for their employees and the impact of no plan on that employer, the whole thing really is about planning. So for an advisor who has other business with groups and individuals, using a specialist can help them see how much easier it is than they might have perceived it to be. Right now, I'd like to introduce Tom Ritzke, who's been working in the long-term care industry business since 1991. And I think we probably met around 1991. And his emphasis has been on communicating the value of the extended and the long-term care planning to advisors, employers, as well as consumers. He is the managing principal at LTC Partners, a national brokerage, and he's worked closely with carriers and vendors to make long-term care insurance easier to sell. In other words, information directly from working in the field with consumers and with advisors. Tom?
Thanks, Carol. This is the slide that I look at just about every day when I see the gap in between the awareness of long-term care insurance and kind of the desire to plan and look at it, but yet the actual adoption rate. So what I'd like to talk about is some of the strategies and ideas and findings in order to fill in this gap, to get more people who want to have long-term care insurance actually get it, and look at some of the obstacles that are in the way of that occurring and happening. I think there's really two big hurdles in getting people to plan for care from a consumer psychological perspective. One of them is, you talk about how long we've been in the business, and the classical economic theories of rational decision making over the last few years and few decades have been found that they're really not as, people don't act in their rational interests as we think they did. And we kind of knew this instinctively, but we didn't really have the amount of data around to see how people really do act and buy. So one of the things we'll talk about a little bit is the behavioral economics problem with the behavioral finance issue related to long-term care planning and some of the hurdles that are occurring for that. I think the other thing that is also out there, and this becomes a problem for either distributors or carriers, as they're trying to come up with ideas and strategies to increase sales, is that if you go to people and ask them about, like, yeah, I'm planning on buying long-term care insurance, and then they don't follow through, it's this idea of, for lack of a better term, preference falsification, in that people don't, they kind of lie to you, frankly, about what their plan is. And I said, Carrie, you made that, Denise, you made a good point on people who are employees, and they're not willing to admit the impact of caregiving that's having on them. Employees who have student loans aren't willing to admit the impact that student loan debt is going on. So these two big issues are big hurdles, but I think there are approaches through that, and that's what I want to talk about. So this really discusses why people make and how they make irrational financial decisions presented with infrequent and complex financial decisions. So you've got things that people are used to doing, habit year in, year out, they're getting a little better at. Things like health insurance, 401k planning, vision and dental. They have an annual open enrollment period, and they're used to it. They're actually getting a little better at making those decisions year in and year out, although not great. Something like long-term care insurance often is something that happens maybe once in your life, and they're not used to it. So a lot of the, again, the things that may allow you to rationally choose a big screen TV or a phone, long-term care insurance, you've never seen it before, you're going to act more irrationally. And I think that's really important recognition to decide if that's the case, what are some of the things that are going to make people take action and position it in the right way. And I think what's really changed over the past few years, and really exciting going forward, is the amount of data we're now getting on consumer purchasing behavior. And obviously we've seen it through the big companies like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, who are seeing how people are actually working, actually looking what they're doing. And this information, once you have a lot of it, you can then look at those behaviors and actually kind of back into, what are the messages that are going to be more effective for a particular audience. So we've been around since 1981, like you mentioned, Carol, lots and lots of policy data. So now you can take that data, feed it into a machine that can spit out, like, what is the best buyer profile? When did people take action along a certain time frame? And I think what you're going to find out is that you're going to have this combination of, at the front end, identifying the consumers who are ready to maybe buy, and then at the back end matched up with LTC specialists, advisors, people who are going to actually then have the conversation and bring it home. When I came to the conference, I drove in an Uber and had an awesome conversation with the Uber driver. Uber is an amazing thing when you can just hail a car so easily. What I really enjoyed and what made me a little sad was the fact that Uber wants to get to driverless cars sometime, and I would have never had that interaction. And I think that these companies who are learning about the insurance market and this are going to find that matching up at the front end with a real live human advisor is going to be the key to success in the future. And I think that's really exciting. At the recent long-term care conference in Chicago, we actually had some people who were internet startup people who had backgrounds in consumer internet companies, and now they're looking at long-term care insurance because they're like, I liked, selling toilet paper over the internet, but now I want to make an impact. I want to do something that's going to really have a make a large impact on society. They're like, but, we don't know anything about this, help us out. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably going to want to sell it direct, but you're going to need to partner with somebody who's going to help you out with this. And I think that's the most exciting part, is that right now we're in the early awareness stage of what's driving behavior in long-term care. And long-term care insurance has such a long sales cycle. So we track all the leads, consumer leads, that advisors or companies work with from that initial contact point all the way until the case is paid. So you can go to Amazon website and again order something instantly and you'll get it right away. Chad, you mentioned that's the goal, to get to where we could get that done. But right now, from the initial contact, you're talking about, 22 weeks before 50% of those initial leads end up being paid business. So remember, this chart talks about these are all applications that end up being placed in paid business, how long it takes to get to that point. And even 10% of them are beyond 12 months. So the traditional approaches with a product in which you can kind of, talk to somebody right away and have them make a decision and then move on, they're not necessarily the approach that's going to work with long-term care planning. You've got to have a little more patience because you don't know when in that sales cycle people have made that decision to go forward. And, we're learning more about what are some of the impacts and what are the things that can make that difference and make that happen, potentially. This is in just an example of some of the way that people think about different behavioral economics and financial decision making, and we'll talk about some of these within the context of long-term care insurance in a little bit. But one of the obvious ones that most people are familiar with is that confirmation bias, cherry-picking information that backs up what they already know. And for those of us in the long-term care, all long-term care insurance is going to have rate increases, or everything they come up with, they're going to have those type of biases and stick with that really tightly. And I think overcoming that is one of the critical things to occur. But some of the other ones that we talk about here are the fact that storytelling and vivid examples are so critical in having people make decisions. And we looked at statistics versus stories, and the feelings trumping facts as well. So let's get into a few of these principles from a more tactical perspective, and what we've seen works well with people taking action with long-term care insurance. So the first one we have touched a little bit in this presentation, and something we really strongly believe in is giving away information without expecting anything in return, that reciprocity factor. And I know a lot of companies and distributors have done a great job of saying, hey, we're going to educate people, we're going to give you guides to planning and why you should look at this. But that's just not done just for altruistic reasons. We understand that people, when they get a charity letter in the mail and it includes like a stamp or a nickel or whatever, they understand that's the principle of reciprocity. You're going to get more people who feel a little bit obliged to give back if you've given them something without being asked for it. So that's an important context, and that's why it's so important to have that type of education material that you can constantly drip on people through that sales cycle. The next one, we'll go into a little more detail, scarcity, which is really interesting related to long-term care insurance and specifically the group world. But if I was a company, I would definitely come up with a collector's edition long-term care insurance product that had a limited availability and would sell out so that people could, people love that type of stuff. My son loves the, clothes in which they have a limited amount of it to get to it and collect it. But we'll talk a little bit about scarcity in a couple slides. Authority is a critical part of long-term care planning with consumers. So, and that's again, NAIFA right here, all the different things that people go into, the designations, the education, before you talk to someone. Developing that authority is going to be critical. Consistency principle. We tend to stick with what we've already chosen, so documenting, having those conversations, making sure that we're getting buy-in early on and then sticking with that throughout the sales process is important. Liking is a very important principle of persuasion as well, in which you're making that common connection with people, and I think that's why people love using LinkedIn and some of the social media channels in order to develop communication, develop a conversation going on. And finally, we'll get in a little more about consensus or social proof. With a product that's infrequently purchased, like long-term care insurance, people want to know, what are people doing? What are people buying so I don't make a mistake? And it was kind of like that old adage where if you were in IT, you never got fired for recommending IBM because it's something that everybody did. So what are the type of plan designs or programs that won't get people in trouble? So one of the examples of this would be scarcity. So within the context of voluntary and group long-term care insurance enrollment, this is a typical experience we have when we're doing an education campaign and having kind of an open enrollment period for people to buy insurance. Surprisingly, not everybody is just week one, first thing they do in that morning, as soon as they get that email about long-term care insurance, it's going right away to sign up. That's not the first thing that happens. In fact, you can see week 1, 2%, week 2, 3%, week 3, 3%, and that's when you get really nervous. At week 3, you're like, oh, this is really bad news. This isn't going to work out. But then at that closing time, the last week, you get about 80% of people participating, and then you kind of throw in a little bit of an extension because, now you're like, hey, we know you screwed up, you didn't sign up in time, but here's a little extension, you get a last chance to sign up. We all know those 5% people, by the way. They're all over the place. So that's a great example of why scarcity works so well. Another example is product changes. We see that all the time. When a company makes, in fact, over the last 20 years, I would say, a good chunk of our sales have been through, hey, a product's changing, and this is the last chance you get to get this product, you better get it now. People do it whether they know anything about the new product. Even if the price is higher or lower, they don't really matter. They're like, I better get into this one now before the other one happens. And that's why I joke about, half seriously, come on, companies, come up with a limited edition product that will sell out. Another thing that happens is closeout emails. So if you're doing a trip communication and you're not getting any action, you're not getting people to download a white paper or a guide or fill out a survey, it's amazing. You can send an email out that says, hey, we haven't heard from you, we're going to turn you off from the file. They'll go like, no, wait, I'm not quite ready yet. Let me know a little more about what you're doing, and maybe at that time I'll look at it. And with long-term care specifically, one of the few things you can make an impact on is the rate changes that happen with birthdays. So you can reach out to people and say, hey, you've got a birthday coming up, now's the time to do something. Chad, Denise, we know that visuals help out quite a bit. You look at a big ledger of numbers, people are going to get overwhelmed. And as more products are out there and more ways to look at it, you've got to have more visual ability to allow people to see the difference between two different solutions, for example, and make a decision. So in this case, for years we talked about the growing market for linked hybrid long-term care insurance and the way the products have developed versus standalone. And now we're at the point where I think we can do a little better job of actually having people visually kind of compare it. So in this example, we have a 55-year-old considering a traditional versus a linked life long-term care. The traditional product has a kind of a lifetime pay period, and in this case, we picked a hybrid plan that has a super long pay period as well, like the age 100 or something like that. In this case, we can look at the total cumulative premiums paid. Obviously, you're going to pay a little more for the hybrid plan versus the lifetime of the standalone. The benefit pool initially will grow by the time you get to age 90, a couple columns over, to almost $800,000. And now you can start to visualize, hey, I see I get a little more leverage with that traditional product. On the other hand, with the linked product, I get some benefits as well. I get a life insurance benefit and some cash value too. So it gives people a simple way to kind of compare the two. And then if they've got an objection about potential rate increases, they can look at that. If they're not as concerned, you can have that discussion. So I do think visuals are going to be critically important to help people do this planning. I'm going to hurry up here. Social proof and framing, also mention that really importantly. And a lot of experience, if you're a consumer, is related to, boy, there's 3 different choices I have. Maybe a good, better, best type option, or however you want to look at it. You're really empowering people to do it, but often people will look at the difference and go, you know what, I'm going to stick with the one in the middle or maybe a little more. So our actual premium ends up being about $2,700, and it's right in line with that $2,500 plan that we recommend. So people just don't have time, and they want to have this decision be easy, and this is an easy way to make that decision. I think you've seen it on the 401k side. People used to have about 50 different funds they could pick from, and companies have been smarter, and they've said, hey, you can go self-directed if you want to, but for the most part, we're going to recommend target date funds that will work for you based on your age. A couple other ideas to make this easier for the consumer. Heuristics, rules of thumb, how much do you spend on this? Most people spend about 1% to 2% of their income on premiums. If you back into that, you can come up with a good plan. Focus on the now benefits to overcome the loss aversion problem people have. So the the peace of mind that long-term care insurance provides and some other benefits is going to be important. And of course, story selling. Here's just some language consumers respond to. I'm not a doctor, but I wouldn't be doing my job if we didn't discuss healthcare costs. I want to help you live life on your terms. Little steps that can make a meaningful change in the future, peace of mind, family finances, and future. So as people develop their approach and their sales approach, these are some good ideas to start with. And then finally, feelings are so important. When you're finally talking with somebody and you can get their honest feedback, the 80-20 rule, if you're doing 20% of the talking and they're doing 80% and really expressing their feelings, that's going to help you out quite a bit, long way. So that's kind of our current perspective. I think a lot of exciting stuff is going to happen as we learn more about consumer behavior. But thanks so much.
Thank you, and we are at the top of the hour, so I want to thank our three presenters and thank all of you who came to the session. And I'm sorry we don't have time for questions, but each one of our presenters, did you give a contact? If not, I'd like you to all step back up here with me and let people know how to contact you. Tom?
Sure, thanks. You can just go to ltcipartners.com and look under the contacts and look for Tom Rixey and for the talk meeting.
Google Denise Gott.
There you go. I like it. Yeah.
Simple with my last name being confusing, it's Chad, CHAD, @ashbrokerage.com.
And for all of the advisors and participants, let me remind you that you can reach all three of them at lecp.naifa.org. Thank you.